Hello again, esteemed viewers. It's been a while since I've done one of these. No, whoops, bumped the computer. Um, yeah, I've been going through some stuff, and more. It's easier to just sit down and play a game and talk about it for me than it is to write notes and stuff. And actually, I don't actually have any notes this time. Because today the structure of the video is going to be provided by Mr. Randolph Bourne, um, and I'm going to be reading his essay, "The Handicapped," and compare it to my own experiences and talk about it. So, couple things. One, for those of you who don't know, I think I've quoted Randolph Bourne in these videos before one time. This is going to be like the whole essay, and Randolph Bourne was a. I don't think he was. I don't think he had autism or anything like that, but he was. But he was a. He was physically, handicapped. And it's funny because before reading this and some other stuff by physically handicapped people, I always thought that neurodivergence was a separate affair from that form of ableism. And from physical, like not like they were not that one was more important than the other or anything, but that they're manifested in different ways. After reading this, I've changed my mind basically, because this, even though he died, this essay was written in 1911. And even though Randolph Bourne died in 1918, this still feels like it could have been written about me. So, so yeah, I'm also, I've just been, dealing with a lot of like mental health stuff recently. So that's why I'm not going to be as animated as I normally am. So I think that's everything. With that out of the way, let's get started on the Randolph Bourne's The Handicapped. So, It would not perhaps be thought ordinarily that the man whom physical disabilities have made so helpless that he is unable to move around among his fellows. I was just about to interject with something, but I'll wait till the end of the paragraph. Can bear his lot more happily, even though he suffered pain, and face life with a more cheerful and contented spirit than the man whose deformities are merely enough to mark him out from the rest of his fellows without preventing him from entering with them into most of their common affairs and experiences. But the fact that the former's very helplessness makes him content to rest and not to strive. I know a young man so helplessly deformed that he has to be carried about, who is happy in reading a little, playing chess, taking a course or two in college, and all with the sunniest goodwill in the world, and a happiness that seems strange and unaccountable to my restlessness. He does not cry for the moon. This is something that this is actually honestly one of the most iffy paragraphs. I feel like okay. First of all, the easy stuff. He uses heck, I have the book right here. It's weird reading Emma Goldman, a book that was written by a woman, but it also uses he as like the broader example for humanity. It's just times have changed and all that. I feel like he's being overly how do I put this? I feel like he's I don't know. I would love to hear from people who are more physical, how does he put it? Helpless or whatever. People with different, like nonverbal people or people, on different parts of the spectrum. Like I would love to hear from them and see if that holds true to them. Because part of me is like I think he's making it out to be something they're not. That being said, I have often felt this weird because I'm very what used to be called high functioning. There's good reasons why people don't use that phrase anymore, but I do feel sometimes like I'm in between, the world of the autistic people and the world of the neurotypicals. So I think there is some truth to the fact that being like I think there's some truth to what he says. At least in terms of the people like himself and like me who have that experience. But I do think I don't know. I should probably stop. Yeah. Anyway, when one, however, is in full possession of his faculties and can move about freely, bearing simply a crooked back and an unsightly face, he is perforce drawn into all the currents of life. Particularly if he has his own way in the world to make, his road is apt to be hard and rugged. He will penetrate to an unusual depth in his interpretation of both the world's attitude towards such misfortunes, and of the attitude towards the world which such misfortunes tend to cultivate in men like him. For he has all the battles of a stronger man to fight, and he is at a double disadvantage in fighting them. He has constantly with him a sense of being obliged to make extra effort to overcome the bad impression of his physical defects, and he's haunted with the constant feeling of weakness and low vitality that which makes effort more difficult and renders him easily faint-hearted and discouraged by failure. Something I'm feeling as I'm recording this right now in some ways. He is never confident of himself because he has grown up in an atmosphere where nobody has been very confident of him, and yet his environment and circumstances call out all sorts of ambitions and energies in him which, from the nature of his case, are bound to be immediately thwarted. This attitude is likely to keep him at a generally low level of accomplishment unless he have an unusually strong will, and a strong will is perhaps the last thing to develop under such circumstances. Yeah, this is where it starts to get like this was just I read this for the first time. This was just assigned in a class. I think I've talked about this before, and I read it and I was like, "Holy crap, this is me!" like again, like it's yeah, I have been trying to build up a sense of self-confidence for recently, especially after talking with my therapist and stuff, and it's hard because well it's I feel like I'm getting better, but it's hard because I'm because like it's weird because I don't think anyone ever was like my parents were I think confident of me. I think they did see a lot in me, but I never like I don't know. Again, I think the key word is atmosphere. It's not individual acts. It's the larger culture, basically. It's the larger, like the way autistic people are seen and talked about rather than how individuals. And strong will. Like it's funny because I feel super anxious and uncertain about things, and then I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had a strong will so I wouldn't be so anxious and uncertain. Then I get anxious and uncertain about having a strong will. Go ahead and laugh. It's hilarious. You have my permission for whatever that's worth. So that's I've read this is like my fourth time reading this essay. A lot of times I read it and it just helps. A little bit. I mean, obviously, it hasn't solved all my problems because that would be too much, asking too much. But yeah, there's a reason to have this bookmarked. That vague sense of physical uncomfortableness, which is with him nearly every minute of his waking day, serves to make steady application for hours to any particular kind of work much more irksome than it is even to the lazy man. No one but the deformed. Sorry, I had to. Yeah, something in my throat. Anyway, no one but the deformed man can realize just what the mere fact of sitting a foot lower than the normal beings. Sorry. Discomfort and annoyance. Again, there are some parts of this that I do understand. I don't understand, I should say. There are some differences in the way that, physically handicapped people behave versus the way mentally handicapped. I don't even really like handicapped, but like people like autistic people have. I'm like 6'3". I don't know what it means to. I don't know what that means. For one cannot carry one special chair everywhere, to theater and library and train and schoolroom. This sounds trivial, I know, but I mention it because it furnishes a real, even though usually dim, background of consciousness which one had to reckon with during all one's solid work or enjoyment. The things that the world deems hardest for the deformed man to bear are perhaps really the easiest of all. I can truthfully say, for instance, that I've never suffered so much as a pang from the interested comments on my personal appearance made by urchins in the street, nor from the curious looks of people in the street and public places. To ignore this vulgar curiosity is the simplest and easiest thing in the world. It does not worry me in the least to appear on a platform if I have anything to say and there is anybody to listen. What one does get sensitive to is rather the inevitable way that people, acquaintances and strangers alike, have of discounting in advance what one does or says. Yeah, that's actually, I think there is some truth to that. I you know, I was taught, throughout a lot of my education that that my, that stimming was the reason that, I didn't have any friends, basically. I stopped stimming and I still don't have very many friends, and I've made a lot of those friends when I was still stimming, and so it's this, like, that's what bothers me. That's what, like, weird looks are, I guess they suck, but they bother me. They actually do bother me, but only because that's when the voice comes in. That's when you're not good enough. You're not, you're not, this is why you don't have any friends type thing comes in, I feel like a lot of people who gave me weird looks would find me, pretty easy to get along with if they just asked, talk to me about this. Yeah. There was one time when I was talking to a friend, who just started recently rewatching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and he he took like a minute to say to basically ask about parallels to autism and data in it, and I could tell that that's what he was saying. I can tell that that's what he was saying early. I can tell that's what he was saying when he started the sentence. But then he and I honestly, I'm a straight white cis guy, so I understand that feeling of like not wanting, like just like not wanting to make someone to ruin someone's day. Not wanting to say something that will make someone offended or mad at you if they're in a minority. So I get why I think I have done what he was doing, but it was kind of funny to me, and I really didn't mind it. I actually like talking about it, but no, not many people feel comfortable talking about it because they think we're sensitive to that. Yeah. Anyway, that's at least it's what I get. The deformed man is always conscious that the world... Wait, hold on. I don't think I finished. Sorry. I guess this is what happens when you don't have a script or an outline. Let's see. Did I finish that paragraph? Yeah, I did. Okay, sorry. Deformed man is always conscious that the world does not expect very much from him, and it takes him a long time to see this as a challenge instead of a firm pressing down to a low level of accomplishment. As a result, he does not expect very much of himself. He is timid in approaching people and distrustful of his ability to persuade and convince. He becomes extraordinarily sensitive to other people's first impressions of him. Those who are to be his friends he knows instantly, and further acquaintance adds little to the intimacy and warm friendship he at once feels for them. On the other hand, those who do not respond to him immediately cannot by any effort, either on his part or theirs, overcome that first alienation. Yeah, I mean, I still have a hard time. This is one of those things. I've talked about this, I think, a lot before. I don't know about on the show, but I do talk about this a lot in real life. There's stuff where I logically understand. I logically understand that I am capable of achievement, but I haven't. Like, I don't know how to get that to sink into my gut feeling, because the gut feeling is really what drives you. Like I'm not gonna. Even though I know I can write at least okay stuff right now. I'm not going to write that, because you need that kind of passion and drive to make anything that you're happy about. So yeah, I mean, heck, that might be one reason why I these videos tend to be, on the channel, tend to be, lower effort and lower. And I'm constantly clarifying what I'm saying and all that. Yeah. Anyway. And as for the ability to persuade and convince, yeah, I am, I have a tendency to I don't know if this is related. I have a tendency to let strangers' bad takes, like blatantly like hateful, bigoted, and not just that, but just wrong, just like factually incorrect, and like statements that don't hold up to modest scrutiny. I have a tendency to think about them a lot, and I don't, and more than people probably think about what I say back to them. So yeah, timid at approaching people, holy grail. Basically, what I've been doing, I've actually, one of the reasons I'm recording this video now, I've had this on my mind for a while, but I find myself I keep going up to the I find myself I keep going uptown, on campus basically, and I just like I want to talk to I want to talk to these people, and I don't have like I can't. I don't know what to say. I don't. I want to talk to these people, but I'm worried that they're just gonna be like, like even if they're like some. And again, logically, I know a lot of times that just means they don't want to talk. They don't want that. Sometimes they're just not in the mood. I'm worried that emotionally I'm gonna be like, that means nobody wants to be my friend anyway. Yeah. So this sensitiveness has both its good and bad sides. It makes friendship the most precious thing in the world to him, and he finds that he arrives at a much richer and wider intimacy with his friends than do most ordinary men with their light service friendships, based on good fellowship or the convenience of the moment. But on the other hand, this sensitiveness absolutely unfits him for business and the practice of profession, where one must be all things to all men, and the professional matter is indispensable to success. For here, where he has to meet a constant stream of men of all sorts and conditions, his sensitiveness to these first impressions will make his case hopeless. Except with those few who by some secret sympathy will seem to respond, his deformity will stand like a huge barrier between his personality and other men's. The magical good fortune of attractive personal appearance makes its way almost without effort in the world, breaking down all sorts of walls of disapproval and lack of interest. Even the homely person can attract by personal charm, but deformity cannot even be charming. Yeah, that's again something. It's like one of those like, yeah, I agree. I have like I have a couple of friends, who I hold, even though I have a hard time figuring out how to express it, I do hold their friendship very, very near and dear to my heart. But I also don't I hate job interviews. I hate because they're so like they are honestly they're like even more they feel even more fake and stilted than meaningless small talk. And that has the that yeah, it took me a long time to find my first job. I had to spend a lot of time going to interviews, and yeah, I hated it. Yeah, again, this is one of those, I don't have much to add. The doors of the deformed man are always locked. I love this paragraph, by the way. The doors of the deformed man are always locked, and the key is on the outside. He may have treasures of charm inside, but they will never be revealed unless the person outside cooperates with him in unlocking the door. A friend becomes, to a much greater degree than with the ordinary man, the indispensable means of discovering one's own personality. One only exists, so to speak, with friends. It is easy to see how hopelessly such a sensitiveness incapacitates a man for business, professional, or social life, where the hasty and superficial superficial impression is everything, and disaster is the fate of the man who has not all the treasures of his personality in the front window, where they can be readily inspected and appraised. That is just so, like, there have been times when people have just said something to me and it's like, oh, I know what to do here. Like, I know what to say. And it always feels like, oh, here's, like, let me talk, like, share myself with you. Let me like, that sounds like a euphemism. Everything's a euphemism. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Everything's a euphemism if you put your mind to it. There's just this, like, this relief and this, like, whenever someone just, like, talks to me and is willing to let myself open up to them, basically. Yeah. Another paragraph I really like. It thus takes the deformed man a long time to get adjusted to his world. Childhood is perhaps the hardest time of all. As a child, he is a strange creature in a strange land. It was my own fate to be just strong enough to play about with the other boys and attempt all their games and stunts without being strong enough to actually succeed in any of them. It never used to occur to me that my failures and lack of skill were due to circumstances beyond my control, but I would always impute them, in consequence of my rigid Calvinistic bringing up, I suppose, to some moral weakness of my own. I suffered tortures in trying to learn to skate, to climb trees, to play ball, to conform in general to the ways of the world. I never resigned myself to the inevitable, but overexerted myself constantly in a grim determination to succeed. I was good at my lessons and through timidity rather than priggishness, I hope, a very well-behaved boy at school. I was devoted to music and learned to play the piano pretty well, but I despised my reputations for excellence in these things, and instead of adapting myself philosophically to the situation, I strove and have been striving ever since to do the things I could not. Again, I don't actually know what it's like to want to skate and climb trees and play ball, because I've always been kind of, it's funny because I'm actually not, I'm a very unathletic person in real life, but I have always been able to do those things. But again, I've also, like, I feel I have experienced the same general feeling, just with different things. In this case, it's more like just trying to make friends, trying to talk to people. And also, going to parties, there is a physical aspect to autism in stimming, in sensory overload, in things like that. Anyway. As I look back now, it seems perfectly natural that I should have followed the standards of the crowd and loathed my high marks in lessons and deportment, and the concerts to which I was sent by my aunt, and the exhibitions of my musical skill that I had to give before admiring ladies. Whether or not such an experience is typical of handicapped children, there is tragedy there for those situated as I was. For had I been a little weaker physically, I should have I should have been thrown back on reading omnivorously and cultivating my music with some possible results. While if I had been a little stronger, I could have participated in the play on an equal footing with the rest. As it was, I simply tantalized myself and grew up with a deepening sense of failure and lack of pride in what I really excelled at. Yeah, I actually want to go back to the previous paragraph, not the one I just read, but the one before that, because there's this line here. Childhood is perhaps the hardest time of all. As a child, he is a strange creature in a strange land. Because I was, like, that was so true growing. Like, I've said before, I used to say it a lot more, like, childhood is the mythical prelapsarian version of your past. It's not, and I think there is some truth to that. We tend to look back on our childhoods with a sense of, that it was better. That's kind of what nostalgia is. You think of something, remember the good parts while ignoring the bad parts of the past. That being said, I also was very cynical about childhood, experiences and nostalgia, because I wasn't a happy child. And it took me a long time to realize that. Like, I have not been happy for years. Like I haven't been truly fulfilled or like comfortable for years. I think it's only like as I've gotten older that I've started to feel better about myself, and we'll get to that later. And emphasis being start, because I still have a long way to go in terms of feeling better about myself. When the world becomes one of dances and parties and social evenings and boy and girl attachments, the world of youth, I was to find myself still less adapted to it. Yeah, seriously. And this was the harder to bear because I was naturally sociable, and all these things appealed tremendously to me. The world of admiration and gaiety and smiles and favors and quick interest and companionship, however, is only for the well-begotten and the debonair. It was not through any cruelty or dislike, I think, that I was refused admittance. Indeed, they were always very kind about inviting me, but it was more as if a ragged urchin had been asked to come and look through the window at the light and warmth of a glittering party. I was truly in the world, but not of the world. He brought up his Calvinist upbringing. I think Mormonism, growing up, I grew up Mormon, was also a problem. For me, and I bring that up because in the world, not of the world, is a common phrase they use in Mormonism. Basically, like, don't listen to anything outside the institution is what it basically means. It's just funny how I was kind of living that already and didn't know it. Indeed, there were times when one would almost prefer conscious cruelty to the silent, unconscious, gentle oblivion. And this is the tragedy, I suppose, not only of the deformed, but of all the ill-favored and unattractive to a greater and less degree. The world of youth is a world of so many conventions, and the abnormal in any direction is so glaringly and hideously abnormal. Because, that's so true. For a long time, I saw myself as a, kind of as a defense mechanism, I saw myself as a, Sherlock Holmes or, like a misanthropic person who's like above it all and and like it took me a long time to realize, no, I'm actually really lonely. I actually learned this. One of the key things that made me learn this was the Flash game, Loneliness, where it's like I am sociable. I like people. I like talking to people, especially about, ideas and experiences and, not just small talk. But I didn't have anything I didn't have anything worth it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't find a way to talk about those things. That's one reason why I think I'm on the internet so often, because it's generally easier for autistic people to communicate there. And also I really like how he mentions that it wasn't through any cruelty. Like there have been times when I went to parties, like drama club parties, and I was just like on my phone reading Fire Emblem support conversations. Yes, this is a real story. And people went up to me and said like, hey, come join us. And I was always like, oh, because it wasn't really their fault, but I had just been so fearful. Like I was like legitimately nervous and anxious and scared about what would happen, and so there's this like, I'm here but I'm not, and it's just it's a mess. It's a mess. Again, this is why I'm glad I'm not in high school anymore, but I do still feel that desire to like talk to people and experience what they have to say and all that. So the I'm trying to think of anything else. I'll come back to it if I remember. Although it took me a long time to understand this, and I continue to attribute my failure mostly to my own character, trying hard to compensate for my physical deficiencies by skill and cleverness. I suffered comparatively few pangs and got much better adjusted to this world than to the other. For I was older and I had acquired a lively interest in all the social politics. I would get so interested in watching how people behaved and in sizing them up that only at rare intervals would I remember that I was really having no hand in the game. The interest just in the ways people are human has become more and more of a positive advantage in my life, and has kept sweet many a situation that might easily have cost me a pang. Not that a person with my disabilities should be a sort of detective, evil-mindedly using his social opportunities for spying out and analyzing his friends' foibles, but that if he does acquire an interest in people apart from their relation to him, he may go into a society with an easy conscience and a certainty that he will be entertained and possibly entertaining, even though he cuts a poor enough social figure. He must simply not expect too much. That I do generally. I don't find myself in I don't actually. This is actually something that I kind of understand, especially when I just go and like look at people, like just go. There's this. Like it's not. I'm constantly worried about stalking. And that I've got kind of. That's a whole nother topic I don't really want to get into right here. But the let's just say it has something to do with being. I don't know. I'm just gonna say it. I've already. I was like the Mormon experience added to it because I was a super repressed Mormon teenager, and so basically any like peer I saw wearing like I'll just use a real example. Sometimes people wearing sports bras, like I was like looking at them and like, but like I knew like I knew it was wrong, and I heard one time I heard one of them just like whispered something to their friend about me, and it was like this like yeah they're right, like I shouldn't be staring at them like this, but I just it's hard to describe if you haven't experienced it before. And I haven't been doing that recently because I'm not, let's just say I'm not so repressed. And so, but there is like and I think I've gotten better at like like looking at people and having an interest in their lives without like coming across as a stalker. I'll just say it how it is. Perhaps the bitterest of struggles of the handicapped man come when he tackles the business world. If he has to go out himself to look for work, without fortune, training, or influence, as I personally did, his way will indeed be rugged. His disability will work against him for any position where he must be much in the eyes of men, and his general insignificance has a subtle influence in convincing those to whom he applies that he is unfitted for any kind of work. As I have suggested, my keen sensitiveness to other people's impressions of him make him more than usually timid and unable to counteract that fatal first impression by any display of personal force and will. He cannot get his personality over across that barrier. The cards seem stacked against him from the start. With training and influence, something might be done, but alone and unaided, his case is almost hopeless. At least this was my own experience. We were poor relations, and our prosperous relatives thought they had done quite enough for us by sending me through college, and I did not seem strong enough to work my way through, although I have since done it. I started out auspiciously enough, becoming a sort of apprentice to a musician who invented a machine for turning out music rolls. Here, with steady work, good pay, and the comfortable consciousness that I was helping support the family, I got the first pleasurable sensation of self-respect I think that I ever had. But with the failure of this business, I was precipitated against the real world. That's not really something I've experienced. I talked a bit about how I had a hard time with job interviews, although my parents were good in helping me out. That's not the thing. Like there are certain paragraphs here that I like really want to talk about, and there are certain where it's like, yeah, that's kind of how it is for me. I'm gonna move on. It would be futile to recount the story of my struggles, how I was sieged for nearly 2 years, firm after firm, in search of a permanent position, trying everything in New York in which I thought I had the slightest chance of success, meanwhile making a precarious living by a few music lessons. The attitude toward me ranged from, "You can't expect us to create a place for you," to, "How could it enter into your head that we should find any use for a man like you?" The situation was doubtless unusual. Few men handicapped as I would be likely to go so long without arousing some interest and support in relative or friend. But my experience serves to illustrate the peculiar difficulties that a handicapped man sees if he has his own way to make in the world. He is discounted from the start. It is not business to make allowances for anybody. And while people were not cruel or unkind, it was the hopeless finality of the thing that filled one's heart with despair. Again, not a lot to add there. The environment of a big city is perhaps the worst possible that a man in such a situation could have. For the thousands of seeming opportunities lead one restlessly on and keep one's mind perpetually unsettled and depressed. There is a poignant mental torture that comes with such an experience. The urgent need, the repeated failure, or rather the repeated failure even to obtain a chance to fail, the realization that those at home can ill afford to have you idle, the growing dread of encountering people, all this is something that those who have never been through it can never realize. Personally, I know no particular way of escape. One can expect to do little by one's own unaided efforts. I solved my difficulties only by evading them, and by throwing overboard some of my responsibility, and by taking the desperate step of entering college on a scholarship. These desultory work is not nearly so humiliating when one is using one's time to some advantage, and college furnishes an ideal environment where the things at which a man handicapped like myself can succeed really count. One's self-respect can begin to grow like a weed. I find it funny that he uses a weed as a metaphor for self-respect, because it is kind of what it feels like. It's like this, like, at least at first, it feels aberrant. It feels like personally speaking, I'm so used to just having no self-respect and thinking that's humility, that that having any feels like weird and like I'm being too proud and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, and also, if you're autistic, being in a big city can often lead to sensory overload. Yeah, anyway. At the bottom of all the difficulties of a man like me is really the fact that his self-respect is so slow in growing up. Accustomed from childhood to being discounted, his self-respect is not naturally very strong, and it would require pretty constant success in a congenial line of work really to confirm it. If he could only more easily separate the factors that are due to his physical disability from those that are due to his weak will and character, he might more quickly attain self-respect, for he would realize that what he is responsible for and what he is not. But at the beginning, he rarely makes allowances for himself. He's his own severest judge. He longs for a strong will, and yet the experiences of having his efforts promptly nipped off at the beginning. There's a lot of plant metaphors here. Nipped off at the beginning is the last thing on earth to produce that will. Yeah, I do think that self-doubt, being able to examine your own ways of thinking and self-critique is important, and to critique your own work is also really important. I think Alan Moore said something along those lines. But there's a difference between, healthy self-doubt, looking at something and examining it and moving on, and just like, everything I do is crap and I'm never going to be able to do anything with this. Life, particularly if he is brought into harsh and direct touch with the real world, is a much more complex thing to him than to the ordinary man. Many of his inherited platitudes vanish at the first touch. Life appears to him as a grim struggle where ability does not necessarily mean opportunity and success. The meritocracy is a lie and always will be, nor piety sympathy, and where helplessness cannot count on assistance and kindly interest. Human affairs seem to be running on a wholly irrational plan, and success is to be founded on chance as much as on anything. But if he can stand the first shock of disillusionment, he may find himself enormously interested in discovering how they actually do run, and he will want to burrow into the motives of men and find the reasons for the crass inequalities and injustices of the world he sees around him. He has practically to construct anew a world of his own and explain a great many things to himself that the ordinary person never dreams of finding unintelligible at all. He will be filled with profound sympathy for all who are despised and ignored in the world. When he has been through the neglect and struggles of a handicapped and ill-favored man himself, he will begin to understand the feelings of all the horde of the unpresentable and unemployable, the incompetent and the ugly, the queer and crotchety people who make up so large a proportion of human folk. Yeah, again, not much to say there. It is like so many things like that are just seen as normal by neurotypicals. I look at that and I'm like, that's completely, why is it that way? Why is it like that? Why do we have to go through this ritual of talking about the weather before we can actually talk about something interesting about learning something interesting about another person? Yeah. So this is so much, again, like, this is one of those, like, I don't really have much to add here, but he's right. This is how we feel. I do want to say, I'm worried that, this is a thing, that I'm constantly worried about, is, like, I'm worried that admitting to any problem, like, any negative emotions that come with, growing in an ableist, society, I'm worried that that's going to empower people who want a cure for these things, where it's like, no, that's honestly, talking about a cure just makes it worse. Like, the solution isn't a cure. It's more acceptance and changing society, all that hard but important and stuff. That's really the only thing that is gonna make me happier. make this not be relatable to something to someone's experiences 100 years from now. We are perhaps too prone to get our ideas and standards of worth from the successful, without reflecting that the interpretations of life which patriotic legend, copybook philosophy, and the sayings of the wealthy give us are pitifully inadequate for those who fall behind in the race. Surely there are enough people to whom the task of making a decent living and maintaining themselves and their families and their social class, or of winning and keeping the respect of their fellows, is a hard and bitter task. To make a philosophy gained through personal disability and failure as just and true a method of appraising the life around us as the cheap optimism of the ordinary professional man, and certainly a kindlier, for it has no shade of contempt or disparagement about it. Not much. I don't think I have much to add there. It irritates me as if I have been spoken of contemptuously myself, to hear people called common or ordinary, or to see that the deadly and delicate feeling of social gradations crop out, which so many of our upper middle class women seem to have. I don't know why it specifically mentions women. It makes me wince to hear of a man spoken of as a failure, or to have it said of one that he doesn't amount to much. Instantly, I want to know why he has not succeeded, and what have been the forces that have been working against him. He is the truly interesting person. Yet how little of our eager, pressing, onrushing world cares about such aspects of life, and how hideously, though unconsciously cruel and heartless, he usually is. Yeah. That again, not much. Not much to say there. Although I'm still weirded out by this. Upper middle class women. I mean, certainly women do have that as well, but men do too. Arguably, men have it more, and we'll get into that later. Often I had tried in arguments to show my friends how much of circumstance and chance go to the making of success. When I reached the age of sober reading, a long series of works of radical social philosophers, beginning with Henry George, provided me with the materials for a philosophy which explained why men were miserable and overworked, and why there was on the whole so little joy and gladness among us, and fixed the blame. Here was suggested a goal and a definite glorious future towards which all good men might work. My own working hours became filled with visions of how men could be brought to see all that this meant, and how I in particular might work some great and wonderful thing for human betterment. In more recent years, the study of history and social psychology and ethics has made those crude outlines sounder and more normal, and brought them into a saner relation to other aspects of my life and thought. But I have not lost the first glow of enthusiasm, nor by my belief in social progress as the first right and permanent interest for every thinking and true-hearted man or woman, or non-binary person. I'll just, he probably didn't even know about non-binary identities. Also, again, I'm gonna pull this out, and this is that for me. That is something I realized. I actually think there's always something that I'm struggling with that he talks about that he never noticed before, because it seems like to me that he's saying like it's not like I used to only think about politics and social justice and all that, and I used to only strive for that, and I think part of that was as a way to not have to deal with the ordinary everyday stuff. And I think again, obviously I'm sitting here talking about it. I still care about social and economic justice and all that. But I also have been learning to let myself, care about more frivolous things. Yeah. I'm ashamed that my experience has given me so little chance to count in any way toward either the spreading of such a philosophy or toward direct influence and action. Nor do I yet see clearly how I shall be able to count effectually towards this ideal. Of one thing I am sure, however, that life will have little meaning for me except as I am able to contribute towards some idea of social betterment, if not in deed, then in word. For this is the faith that I believe we need today, all of us, a truly religious belief in human progress, a thorough social consciousness, an eager delight in every sign and promise of social improvement, and best of all, a new spirit of courage that will dare. I want to give the young men and young women whom I see, who with fine intellect and high principles lack just the light of the future on their faces that would give them a purpose and meaning in life, To them, I want to give some touch of this philosophy that will energize their lives, that will save them from disheartening effects of the poisonous counsel of timidity and distrust of human ideals, which pours out in steady steam from reactionary press and pulpit. Again, not much to say there. I will say that he's is certainly making me. It doesn't. That hasn't. What did he say he wanted it to do? Energize their lives and say it didn't save me, but it does help me. I'm not. Yeah. I wish I could tell Randolph Bourne, like how much this essay meant to me. It is hard to tell just how much of this philosophy has been due to my handicaps. If it is solely to my physical misfortunes that I owe this its existence, the price has not been a heavy one to pay, for it has given me something that I would not know how to be without. For, however gained, this radical philosophy has not only made the world intelligible and dynamic to me, but it has furnished me with the strongest spiritual support. I know that many people, handicapped by physical weakness and failure, find consolation and satisfaction in a very different sort of faith, in an evangelical religion, and a feeling of close dependence on God and close communion with Him. But my experience has made my ideal of character militant rather than long-suffering. I very early experienced a revulsion against the rigid Presbyterianism in which I had been brought up, a purely intellectual revulsion, I believe, because my mind was occupied for a long time afterward with theological questions, and the only feeling that entered into it was a sort of disgust at the arrogance of damning so great a proportion of the human race. I read T.W. Higginson's The Sympathy of Religions with the greatest satisfaction and attended the Unitarian Church whenever I could slip away. This faith, while it still appeals to me, seems at times a little too static and refined to satisfy me with completeness. For some time there was a considerable bitterness in my heart at the narrowness of the people who could still find comfort in the old faith. Reading Buckle and Oliver Wendell Holmes gave me a new contempt for conventionality. My social philosophy still further tortured me into throwing the burden of the misery of the world on these same good neighbors. And all this, although I think I did not make a nuisance of myself, made me feel a spiritual and intellectual isolation in addition to my more or less effective physical isolation. Happily, these days are over. The world has righted itself, and I have been able to appreciate and realize how people count in a social and group capacity as well as an individual and personal one, and to separate the two in my thinking. Really to believe in human nature while striving to know the thousand forces that warp it from its ideal development, to call for and expect much from men and women, and to not be disappointed and embittered if they fall short, to try to do good to people rather than to try to do good with people rather than to them. This is my religion on its human side, and if God exists, I think that He must be in the warm sun, in the kindly actions of the people we know and read of, in the beautiful things of art and nature, and in the closest of friendships. Those are things I associate with Satan personally, but I'm an edgy atheist. I do think that I wouldn't necessarily call this my religion, but I do like this vision of the world to strive for. And also, I like this, to call not being disappointed and bitter when they fall short, because that's one thing I noticed, and I think he's going to get into that later, or maybe he won't. Anyway, one thing I noticed is that I am much more willing to forgive people than I am for, I'll forgive someone for doing something, and I won't forgive myself for doing the exact same thing. It's not logical, I know, but it's irrational, Again, it's that feeling of I need to be better, and it's never good enough, and I'm my own harshest judge and all that. Death, I do not understand it at all. I have seen it in its cruelest, most irrational forms, where there has seemed no excuse. It's not even 11 o'clock, and I'm still yawning. No palliation. I have only known that if we were more careful and more relentless in fighting evil, if we knew more of the medical science, such things would not be. I know that a sound body, intelligent care and training prolong life, and that the death of a very old person is neither sad nor shocking, but sweet and fitting. I see death a perpetual warning of how much there is to be known and done in the way of human progress and betterment. And equally, it seems to me that this is true of disease. So all the crises and deeper implications of life seem inevitably to lead back to that question of social improvement and militant learning and doing. Of course, we've gotten better at curing diseases. We're just not super good at getting those cures to people. Anyway, This then is the goal of my religion, the bringing of a fuller, richer life to more people on this earth. All institutions and all works that do not have this for their object are useless and pernicious, and this is not to be a mere philosophic precept that which may well be buried under a host of more immediate matters, but a living faith to permeate one's thoughts and transfuse one's life. Prevention must be the method against evil. To remove temptation from men and to apply the stimulus which shall call forth their highest endeavors, these seem to me the only right principles of ethical behavior. Not to keep waging in the age-long battle with sin and poverty, but to make the air around men so pure that foul lungs cannot breathe it. This should be our noblest religious aim. Education, knowledge, and training, I have felt so keenly my lack of these things that I count them to be the greatest means for making life noble and happy. I mean, I've said many times that knowledge is its own reward. The lack of stimulus has tended with me to dissipate the power which might otherwise have been concentrated in some one productive direction. Or perhaps it was the many weak stimuli that constantly incited me and thus kept me from following one particular bent. I look back on what seems a long waste of intellectual power, time frittered away in groping and moping, which might easily have been spent constructively. Yeah, I have also... I'm still working on that. I'm still working on right-wing getting right-wing nut jobs out of my head. I'm not going to say what I'm working on getting out of my head because I don't want other people to have to worry about them as well. A defect in one of the physical senses often means a keener sensitiveness in the others. But it seems that unless the sphere of action that the handicapped man has is very much narrowed, his intellectual ability will not grow in compensation for his physical defects. He will always feel that had he been stronger, even successful, he would have been further advanced intellectually and would have obtained greater command over his powers. For his mind tends to be cultivated extensively rather than intensively. He has so many problems to meet, so many things to explain to himself, that he acquires a wide rather than a profound knowledge. Perhaps eventually, by eliminating most of these interests as practicable fields, he may tie himself down to one line of work, special interest. But at first he is pretty apt to find his mind rebellious. If he is eager and active, he will get a smattering of too many things, and his imperfect, badly trained organism will make intense application very difficult. I think there is value in knowing a little about a lot of things, but I agree that it can be to your detriment. Now that I have talked a little of my philosophy of life, particularly about what I want to put into it, there is something to be said also of its enjoyment and what I may hope to get out of it. I have said that my ideal of character was militant rather than long-suffering. It is true that my world has been one of failure and deficit. I have accomplished practically nothing alone. I mean, nobody accomplishes anything alone. Frickin' Isaac Newton admitted that. His shoulders of giants. And can count only on 2 or 3 instances where I have received kindly counsel and suggestion. Moreover, it still seems a miracle to me that money can be spent for anything beyond the necessities without being first carefully weighed and pondered over. But it has not been a world of suffering and sacrifice. My health has been almost criminally perfect in light of my actual achievement, and life has appeared to me, at least since my more pressing responsibilities were removed, as a challenge and an arena rather than a vale of tears. I do not like the idea of helplessly suffering one's misfortunes, of passively bearing one's lot. The Stoics depress me. I do not want to look on my life as an eternal making the best of a bad bargain. Granting all the circumstances, admitting my disabilities, I too want to warm both hands before the fire of life. What satisfactions I have, they are many and precious. I do not want to look on as compensations, but as positive goods. This is something that I like to. It's funny because I kind of have made a habit of like talking about how much I love, sad and depressing stories, but like the sad and depressing stories I like aren't, I should say they're more sad, but they aren't like hopeless, I don't like the idea that life is all suffering and that we can't, we'll never get better and all that. I mean, heck, I love a tragedy, but I also love Star Trek. The difference between what the strongest of the strong and the most winning of the attractive can get out of life, and what I can, is after all so slight. Our experiences and enjoyments, both his and mine, are so infinitesimal compared with the great mass of possibilities, and there must be a division of labor. If he takes the world of physical satisfactions and of material success, I can at least occupy the far richer kingdom of mental effort and artistic appreciation. And on the side of what we are to put into life, although I admit that achievement on my part will be harder relatively to encompass than on his, At least I may have the field of artistic creation and intellectual achievement for my own. Indeed, as one gets older, the fact of one's disabilities fades dimmer and dimmer away from consciousness. One's enemy is now one's own weak will, and the struggle is to attain the artistic ideal one has set. But one must have grown up to get this attitude. This is something I do want to talk about, but I'm going to read the paragraph first. And that is the best thing the handicapped man can do. Growing up will have given him one of the greatest and certainly most durable satisfaction of his life. It will mean at least that he is out of the woods. Childhood has nothing to offer him, youth little more. They are things to be gotten through with as soon as possible. For he will not understand, and he will not be understood. He finds himself simply a bundle of chaotic impulses and emotions and ambitions, very few of which, from the nature of the case, can possibly be realized or satisfied. He is bound to be at cross gains with the world, and he has to look sharp. That he does not grow up with a bad temper and a hateful disposition, and become so cynical and bitter against those who turn him away. But grown up, his horizon will broaden, he will get a better perspective, and he will not take the world so seriously as he used to, nor will failure frighten him so much. He can look back and see how inevitable it all was, and understand how precarious and problematic even the best regulated of human affairs may be. And if he feels there were times when he should have been able to count upon the help and kindly counsel of relatives and acquaintances who remained dumb and uninterested, he will not put their behavior down as proof of the depravity of human nature, but as due to an unfortunate blindness, which it will be his work to avoid in himself by looking out for others when he has the power. Yeah, it's the more I realize, I'm constantly realizing, I'm still in this weird in between. I feel older. Like I feel like I'm old at heart, even though I'm just about to turn 20. But I am still I'm still working on, I keep going uptown and I see people having fun and enjoying themselves. And I'm just sitting there I just want to be like that. I want to be with them. So I want to be frivolous, but then again, frivolous is not necessarily mutually exclusive with maturity. Like I said, I've been learning to not be focusing on every injustice in the world all the time as much as possible, and instead be like, yes, those are bad, and I want to change them, and I'll push for changing them, but I'm also going to take some time to let myself have a bit of fun. So yeah, yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm still working on, especially the better perspective, not taking the world so seriously. Trying to think about what was the other thing. Or failure frightening me. I'm still working on that. Again, this isn't. Sometimes I have to remind myself, this isn't just gonna happen overnight. I'm working on it, and I'm already feeling better than when I started this video. We're almost to the end here. If you're still here for Steve viewers, thank you. Means a lot to me. When he has grown up, he will find that people of his own age and experience are willing to make those large allowances for what is out of the ordinary, which were impossible to his younger friends, and that grown-up people touch each other on planes other than the purely superficial. Wanky. With the broadening of his own interests, he will find himself overlapping with other people's personalities at new points, and will discover with rare delight that he is beginning to be understood and appreciated, at least to a greater degree when he had to keep his real interests hid as something unusual. For he will begin to see his. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm not skipping a line. For he will begin to see his friends, his music and books, and his interest in people and social betterment. His true life, many of his restless ambitions will fade gradually away, and he will come to recognize all the more clearly some true ambition of his life is within the range of his capabilities. He will have built up his world and have sifted out the things that are not going to concern him, and participation in which will only serve to vex and harass him. Again, still working on that. He may well come to count his deformity even as a blessing. I count it. Autism has all the problems I have, all the ways that I've suffered. I haven't suffered because I'm autistic. I've suffered because of an ableist society. None of this. I'm fine the way I am. And I feel sometimes I wonder. I look at neurotypicals and I'm like, I don't it seems a shame that you don't have the blessings I have. Anyway, where did I leave off? He may well, yeah, for it has made. Okay, I'll just start the sentence over. He may well come to count his deformity even as a blessing, for it has made impossible to him at last many things in the pursuit of which he would only fritter away his time and dissipate his interest. He must not think of resigning himself to his fate. Above all, he must insist on his own personality. For once really grown up, he will find that he has acquired self-respect and personality. Grown-upness, I think, is not a mere question of age, but of being able... Thank God for that. I just said it. It's a bad figure of expression. Being able to look back and understand and find one satisfaction in one's experience, no matter how bitter it may have been. So to all who are situated as I am, I would say, grow up as fast as you can. Cultivate the widest interests you can and cherish all your friends. Cultivate some artistic talent, for you will find it the most durable of satisfactions, and perhaps one of the surest means of livelihood as well. Achievement is, of course, on the knees of the gods, but you will at least have the thrill of trial, and after all, not to try is to fail. Taking your disabilities for granted and assuming constantly that they're being taken for granted make your social intercourse as broad and as constant as possible. Do not take the world too seriously, nor let too many social conventions oppress you. Keep sweet your sense of humor, and above all, do not let any morbid feelings of inferiority creep into your soul. You will find yourself sensitive enough to the sympathy of others, and if you do not find people who like you and are willing to meet you more than halfway, it will be because you have let your disability narrow your vision and shrink up your soul. It will be really your own fault and not that of your circumstances. In a word, keep looking outward and look out eagerly for those things that may interest you. For people who will interest you and be friends with you, for new interests and for opportunities to express yourself. You will find that your disability will come to have little meaning for you and that it will begin to fade completely out of your sight. You will wake up some fine morning and find yourself, after all the struggles that seem so bitter to you, really and truly adjusted to the world. I am perhaps not yet sufficiently out of the wilderness to utter all these brave words. I definitely am not. For I must confess, I find myself hopelessly dependent on my friends and my environment. Again, humans are social creatures. No one is an island. I actually have that mask here. I might show it off. Felt like a good thing. Something we needed to know right now. I don't know. I'm actually not looking at the recording like I usually do when I make these. I'm looking at the web page. For I must confess to find myself hopelessly dependent on my friends and my environment. My friends have come to mean more to me than almost anything in the world. If it is far harder work for a man in my situation to make friendships quickly, at least friendships once made have a depth and intimacy quite beyond ordinary attachments. For a man such as I am has little prestige. People do not want to impress him. They are genuine and sincere, talk to him freely about themselves, and are generally far less reticent about revealing their real personality and history and aspirations. And particularly is this so in friendships with young women. I would cross out the young, but I've one thing I look back, even considering my my weird phase when I was going through puberty as a Mormon. I've always, looking back, I have pretty much always gotten along better with women than women. A lot of my close friends are men. But men in general, I find it easier to just sit in a group of women. In high school, I actually had there was one year where I was pretty much always eating. It was like a group of feminists and then me. I've said this before. I don't consider myself a feminist, but I also at least I'm a feminist sympathizer, and it depends on what. I don't know. I prefer to let other people judge that for themselves. Yeah. So even going back, pretty much as far as I can remember, I've always, just gotten along better with women because again, they're socialized differently. I found their friendships the most delightful and satisfying of all. For all the social convention that insists that every friendship between young men and women must be on a romantic basis is necessarily absent in our case. Yeah, there have been. It's funny because there have been certain female friends of mine who I did take romantic interest in, but I always I value this friendship too much to jeopardize it with. But sometimes I've just had friends who are women and was not romantically interested in, but I enjoyed being around them. Let's see. There is no fringe around us to make our acquaintance anything but a charming companionship. With all my friends, the same thing is true. The first barrier of strangeness broken down, our interest is really in each other and not in what each is going to think of the other, how he is to be impressed, or whether we are going to fall in love with each other. When one of my friends moves away, I feel as if a great hole has been left in my life. Yeah. I can think of several people. Yeah. There is a whole side of my personality that I cannot express without him. I shudder to think of any change that will deprive me of their constant companionship. Without friends, I feel as if even my music and books and interests will turn stale on my hands. I confess that I am not grown up enough to get along without them. But if I am not yet out of the wilderness, I think I at least see the way to happiness. With health and a modicum of achievement, I shall not see my lot as unenviable. And if misfortune comes, it will only be something flowing from the common lot of men, not from my own particular disability. Most of the difficulties that flow from that I flatter myself I have met by this time of my 25th year. He died at like 32. Spanish flu. I have looked full in their face, have grappled with, and find in nowise so formidable as the world usually deems them, no bar to my real ambitions and ideals. So yeah, every time I read that, I just feel better. I keep forgetting how much the way I was brought up and the way I see myself is affected by this. And yeah, I mean, like, heck, I don't actually have my yearbook nearby. I don't want to get it, but I actually got the senior superlative for Mr. Congeniality. And for a long time I didn't understand why, because I didn't think people liked me because I was never interacting with them, but they did like me. I think they just didn't really know how to interact with me, and I was just resigned to my fate, basically. So honestly, I hope that helps, esteemed viewers. I might have gotten some word wrongs. If you want to check my quotes and see if they're accurate, I'm gonna link to this in the description down below. Also, like Randolph Bourne's Wikipedia page and the usual, letterboxed Nexus.gg things. Holy crap, this is ended up being a long one. Nexus.gg things. Yeah, so if you like, actually, this is one of those where I'm actually going to say, especially if you know an autistic person, even if they don't seem like they're thinking this, like this way, just send this to them, please. Or maybe not this video, but go to the link below and send that to them. And any likes and shares and comments and subscribes are greatly appreciated. I don't like having to ask for them, and I don't normally like try and legitimately ask people to like and subscribe and all that. I just, if you like it, if not, whatever. But in this case, I am going to ask for that just because I want this video to get out in front of as many people as possible. And I said autistic, but any person like Randolph Bourne described. I shouldn't have just said autistic person. Yeah, so I think that's everything. Thanks for watching, esteemed viewers. Good to be back doing more Jekyllstein Gray Talks series, and I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.